Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to talk about using Harlequins in Drukhari. Before we dig in, the first thing I want to say is I understand that this isn't some hidden secret, and a lot of you probably are already doing it or have at least looked at it. I've contemplated it in the past. I've run Yanari in the past. I do like Yanari. The only thing that really has kept me from running Yanari a lot more is I'm just waiting for some of the Craft World nerfs to shake out a little bit more so I can see where we're headed. In addition, I want to give a big shout out to Military Gaming Command. They are a nonprofit that I've worked with off and on over the last year, really since the duration of my channel. They are a great group of guys and gals. They are all veterans themselves or still in, and they have formed a nonprofit and really just a stellar gaming community. Their focus tends to be more on the video game side. They have allowed me to drive some of the tabletop aspects of it, which I'm very thankful for. And what I did this year is I decided I'm just going to make sure we donate at least 1% of every dollar that my channel generates, whether it's from Patreon or YouTube or web store sales or whatever, 1% of it going to them every month. I started it off by just donating $15 at the beginning of January, and that's going to be my minimum donation every month. If we don't hit $15, that's okay. We're just going to make sure they get $15. As an active duty veteran of the Iraq War, their mission is very near and dear to me, and I really appreciate what it is they do and what it is they bring to the table. And honestly, I feel like had something like this existed when I first got out of the military, especially when I first got out of active duty, my transition probably could have been a lot easier. I really struggled going from active to civilian. I was in the Guard, but that transition was very difficult for me, and I struggled with a lot of alcohol abuse and some anger issues and stuff like that all throughout my 20s. And it's one of those where a community like this is very beneficial, and it just means a lot to me to see what it is they do. And anything that I can do to help them and to help spread their message and their word, I'm going to do it. And that's where I'm going to end this. If you would like to donate to them directly rather than maybe subscribe to my channel or Patreon and then get a portion of that kicked to them, their website is going to be in the description, and you can do direct um, donations to them and just circumvent me altogether, and that's okay. I'd rather you go that route than they just don't get the love and recognition that they deserve. Again, big shout out to them. They are great people. Let's talk about why we should soup. And then after we talk about the whys, we're going to talk about an overview of all the Quins units. And then at the end, we're going to talk about what I would probably bring. And it's not the end all be all of what's best. It's just because of how I play 40K, this is probably what I would bring running Quins. Why would we soup? Let's talk about the fact that it's not a secret. Our index kind of stinks. Has for a long time. It wasn't even that great when the game first launched. Really, it's gone downhill since Ravagers went up in points. Even though most of our index went down, it just doesn't matter because for the most part, most of our data sheets don't really do anything. They don't have a clear and defined role, and I think that's what hurts us the most. It's not just that they're not good, it's that a lot of the things don't really have a this is what I would use this for, this is what I would use this for. They're just kind of lackluster and there. And a lot of times the units are there just as a blade of wounds to take characters that are actually okay. Quins do allow for some interesting options that can shore up some of the weaknesses our index has. We're going to dig into that a little bit. You don't lose anything for bringing them. They don't get to use pain tokens, but they do generate them. They won't have access to strats, but for the most part, ours aren't very good anyway, so that also doesn't matter. Same goes with enhancements. A lot of our enhancements are kind of lackluster. The Art of Pain, getting a pain token every command phase is pretty solid, but that character has to be on the table. So a lot of times it's somebody sitting on a backfield objective with a unit doing nothing, or I know some of you will put it in on the Beastmaster, for example. I know that's a thing that happens as well. I tend to put it on a homunculus, slap it on a unit of racks, and leave them in the backfield just camping in an objective and screening deep strikes. That's typically how I use it. Doesn't make it the best way, just the way I like to do it. A lot of their standalone datasheets tend to just be better than most of ours, even when you account for strats and other support. In addition, they generate pain tokens. As you can see on the graphic there, the rule is worded in such a way that anytime any enemy unit is destroyed, you gain a pain token. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the, well, we're really going to walk through all of them. First one's going to be the Death Jester. It's got a movement of 8, T3, 6 up save, 4 up invuln, 4 wounds, leadership 6, OC 1. So this is effectively the same chassis we have for a lot of our characters, outside of the 4 up invuln for some. The ranged weapon, the Shrieker Cannon, is 3 shots, hitting on 2, strength 6, neg 1, 2 damage with dev wounds. And then the Jester's Blade, he's just very standard strength 4, 0 AP melee. His ability in the shooting phase, if his attacks destroy an enemy model, that unit must make a battle shock test. But then the Cruel Amusement is really why you would take him. In the shooting phase, one Death Jester in your army can use this ability. So if you have 3 Death Jesters, you still only get to pick 1 Death Jester to use this ability. His gun can either ignore cover, gain precision, or sustained hits 3. And it's hilarious. When I ran all clowns the other day, I was thinking it was sustained hits 2. So I really sold my opponent short. Not that it mattered. But we'll kind of talk about that later as well. Overall, he's a great character that does provide something that we just don't have access to, and that's Lone Operative. And that's not a bad thing. Real good for camping backfield objectives, throwing some cheeky shots down range. His range isn't exceptional, so that's another thing to keep in mind. He's only 24 inches, so if you're getting him in line of sight and range to shoot, you're not going to be too far off from getting that counter charge or counter shot coming. Just those are things to keep in mind. I do think he is just infinitely better in a straight Craft Worlds army. Benefits greatly from the support he gets in the detachment, being able to reroll a hit roll and a wound roll, for example. Gaining enhancements and strap supports makes him a pain in the ass, if we're being honest. The ability to Phantasm or the ability to, fire and fade, things like that. In addition, there's an enhancement where they can just flip a die to a 6. So you can just say, okay, I rolled my dice. I'm going to re-roll my die. Oh, I got a 6, but I can turn this other one into a 6. Same with the wounds. You can just be like, well, that wound is a 6. So having all the effectively infinite re-rolls and then still being able to go, okay, well, that one's still a 6, makes it way more efficient of a character. That being said, I don't think from a competitive sense, I don't know that he's worth the 90 points that we would have to spend with Drukhari in order to bring him. Not that he's bad. I just feel maybe if you have 90 points, he's worth taking. But ultimately, the only thing he's bringing to the table that we don't have access to is Lone Operative and then the Dev Wounds. But he'll lose his hit and wound reroll because he won't be in that detachment. And then he won't have the enhancements, and he can't go in any transports. So it's one of those where ultimately I just think he's fun, he's worth bringing because he's still a solid data sheet, but for his points, I just feel like there's better options that we could take as Drukhari to help shore up weaknesses. The Solitaire, this thing is super silly. It moves 12, T3, again, very, very standard elf profile. He does have a 3-up invulnerable save, which is hilarious. The Solitaire weapons have precision, so he can go in and he can bash butts and mix guts and then snipe out characters in melee as well. Once per battle in your movement phase, he can declare a blitz. He has to do it before he makes a normal move. When you declare the blitz, until the end of the turn, you add 2d6 to the model's move characteristic and 3 to the attack's characteristic, and then he's able to advance and charge. This is a great data sheet. And because it's an epic hero, it doesn't get support, but it doesn't really need support. We don't need enhancements, and he can't take enhancements, so it doesn't matter. It fights first. Fights first is a great ability in 10th because it allows you to do your damage as the defender before the attacker gets to do the damage. Obviously, multiple fights first just results in a alternating interaction, but it does make your opponent really think twice about whether or not to charge into something, especially if it can put some damage out. It does have 9 attacks, and it goes up to 12, right? And the Blitz gives it an extra 2d6 inches of movement with advance and charge. If you Blitz, it's 12 plus 3d6 inches for your movement because you get to advance, and you add 2d6 to your movement characteristic, and then 2d6 for charging, which means it's going to average 20 inches of total movement in a single turn. Not 20, it's going to average 30. Math is hard. Sorry about the typo on the screen. He's going to average 30 because it'll be his 12-inch movement plus 17 and a half from all the die rolling, which is going to take you to 29.5 round up to 30. 3-up invuln is super silly, but with only 3 wounds, that means you better roll hot, because if you don't, he's still going to go away. But he fits in very well with Drukhari. And bringing him with Lilith or a Succubus can give you a really nasty double threat that can really put a lot of damage on your opponent's infantry. And if your opponent doesn't have indirect and you position well, it's going to make them really, really think twice about where they're going to put those infantry and what objectives they're going to hold with them. He's really cheap by himself for what he can potentially do. You could just leave your witches out of the list and use those points for something else, because again, you're only bringing the witches so that you can bring the Succubus or Lilith in most situations. He just does what the Succubus and Lilith do in a lot of ways. Not that it's better, it's just different. The precision means he's going to be able to deal with those characters. They are 2 damage swings instead of 1 damage swings, but the Succubus and the Lilith getting anti-infantry means that if you hit something like a Terminator or like the Custodes Terminators, I think are T7, right? You're still wounding those on 3s instead of 5s or 2s if you're Lilith. I wouldn't say he's infinitely better or just a lot better. I would say he's just a little bit different. It's really the points that makes him better. He's very cheap for what you're getting out of it. Shadowseer, once again, we're looking at another standard elf chassis. You can either take a Shuriken Pistol or a Neuro Disruptor. Personally, I'll probably just take the Shuriken Pistol. The Neuro Disruptor having anti-infantry 2+ is fine, but the Shuriken Pistol having neg 1 AP is better, in my opinion. I guess you could maybe chip a wound off of a Marine, but at the same time, you're more likely to do it with the Shuriken Pistol. The Mist Stave is 4 attacks hitting on 2s at strength 5, neg 1 D3, so again, very solid melee. It's not oppressive, but it's pretty good. Strength 5 is pretty solid. Would love to have strength 5 melee on one of my infantry units. He does have leather, he does have stealth, fog of dreams. He gives the unit he's attached to stealth as well. So on a unit of troop, they'll get -1 to hit. And then targeted pathways. At the start of your movement phase, 1 model from your army with this ability can use it. Their unit gains advance and charge. Really solid character. Average melee and average shooting. I would really argue it's above average melee at strength 5. I'm just saying it's not, oh my gosh, this is crazy good. They're not like strength 5 power swords, but strength 5 neg 1 D3 is pretty solid and a good volume of attacks. Granting stealth to the unit's pretty handy. It won't always make a difference, but -1 to hit can be very beneficial depending. Your matchups will make a difference there as well. Gives advance and charge to his attached unit. 1 Shadowseer per turn. Allows for a reroll on your advance roll as well. And then all your pistols and Harlequins are assault. So the whole unit's going to get to advance, shoot, and charge. Granted, their shooting range is very short. The ability to just advance, shoot, and charge, or even having the ability to advance and shoot, opens up a lot of objective scoring for them that witches don't really have, for example, because they don't have assault pistols. 60 points is really cheap, and troop aren't exactly super expensive, and giving a unit of troop advance and charge is really good, because troop can put out a lot of damage if you kind of build them right. I do like bringing a single solitaire. I think it has a lot of utility. It's very useful. But personally, for what I'd be looking to get out of the troop, I just think the Troop Master is going to be a better take for Drukhari. You may feel differently, but I just think with Kabalites being able to advance and shoot, I don't need advance and charge necessarily. If I do need it, I can do it with certain units. You change the role of the unit once you start flipping characters. Infantry, right? Like you're going to go tag infantry and you're going to just kind of go bonk. But when you put the Troop Master in there, it opens up your damage potential quite a bit. And because of that, it makes them a more versatile unit to charge into different things. And that's actually what we are going to talk about next is the Troop Master. We can put a fusion pistol on him, or we can put the Neuro Disruptor or the Shuriken pistol. I would probably put the fusion pistol on it. That's just me personally. You can give him the Troop Master's Blade. Looking at the Harlequin special weapon, there's literally zero reason not to give him the Troop Master's Blade, and honestly, that should just be the only weapon option it has. I don't understand why there's a Harlequin special weapon. Once per turn, when you use a Fate dice, which isn't going to apply to us because we're not going to have Strands of Fate, because we're not going to have our whole army be, etc., and we're not going to have the detachment, blah, 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 blah. While this model is leading a unit, melee weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Devastating Wounds ability. That is super good. He's really cheap, very good data sheet with his 6 attacks at -2 AP. Again, interacting with the Fate dice doesn't really help us at all, but if you're running Craft Worlds or just mono Quins, manipulating those Fate dice is super good because then you can just be like, oh, I've got a 1. Well, I'm just going to use it and it's a 6. Fusion pistols are really solid. They're just better blast pistols. So if you didn't know, they're literally blast pistols, but they get Melta. I, again, don't understand why you would ever take the Quinn special weapon on him. The blade has more attacks, better AP, and no downside. It's almost like the double macro scalpel on the Talos. It just seems slightly like an oversight, like, hey, you can, so here you go. And I understand it's probably a modeling thing. The kit, you could probably put either on it, but at that point, you could just say he has the Troop Master Blade, and then it doesn't matter what's on it. It just counts as the Troop Master Blade. Logically, I just don't see the point. With Dev Wounds, you're going to be rolling with a Harlequin troop unit. You're going to be rolling a ton of dice. You're going to get some Dev Wounds. It also has the Grenades keyword. When you attach it to a troop unit, they hit pretty hard, and they'll have grenades and assault pistols. To me, Troop Master, troops, auto take for Drukhari, because it just gives you a really solid infantry unit that can go into a myriad of different targets, and you're going to put damage onto that target. The troop, on the other hand, are also really good. For 5 of them, it's 75 points each, so they're 15 points a model. Up to 2 models in the unit can take a fusion pistol when you have 10 or less models. You have some options. I believe the Sergeant can take the Power Sword. The standard loadout is the Harlequin's Blade, which is 5 attacks, Strength 3, 0 AP, 1 damage. And then the special weapon is 4 attacks at Strength 4, -1, 1 damage. They get +1 to wound on the charge. Their special weapon is really good. Strength 4, -1, 1 damage with +1 to wound on the charge with the Troop Master giving Dev Wounds. Wow, that's pretty solid. And I know some people are just like, oh, -1, blah, 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 blah. But you're also looking at a 15 point per model unit with Dev Wounds. You're going to get damage through. You could take the Quins Blade to get an additional attack. I prefer the special weapon. I want the Strength 4 and I want the AP because at least on the charge, I'm going to wound T4 Marines on 3s. If I have to, for whatever reason, smack into something like Custodes with them, I'm still going to wound those on 4s. Whereas with the Strength 3, you're going to wound them on 5s. Again, baked in grenades keyword. Our battle line units, it's an option. You have to take the upgrade. Not that it costs points, but it's just one of those things where why would I not take it? I understand from the modeling perspective, this is why. But ultimately, why would I not take it? Just seems dumb. Their ability is fantastic. +1 to wound on the charge. 6 swings from the Troop Master are going to get it too because he's part of the unit. A unit of 5 with Troop Master swings 26 dice at Strength 4. +1 to wound, Dev Wounds. You're going to average 3 Dev Wounds per fight. That's pretty good. That's 3 damage that unless you have a feel no pain, you're just taking. That is a good interaction for you. They smack hard. They trade up well. At 15 points a model, I feel like Troop feel the way Witches should feel. They're not crazy good. They're not dominating the quote-unquote meta or anything. But they're just a really solid unit that can put some damage out if you leave them unchecked. Skyweavers, these are the bikes. These things are awesome. I'm going to touch on those a little bit in just a second. I'm not going to go through their whole data sheet because, again, it's a fairly standard elf bike data sheet. Just know that they can get the Shuriken Cannon, Star Bolus, Skyweaver, Haywire Cannon, or the Zephyr Glaive. And we'll get into that. We'll break it down. Scything Swipes is just the Reaver ability. You fly over a unit, you roll a die for every model in the unit on a 4-up. The unit you flew over takes a mortal wound. Not my favorite ability, but let's go over these and why I think they're awesome. They are a little fragile, but again, what isn't? In our index, you tell me one thing that isn't outside of Talos and Kronos, and even those are arguably fairly fragile when compared to other armies that have an analog. They can be a pretty solid shooting platform. You can give them Star Bolas. They are D3 shots, Strength 7, Neg 2, 2 damage, and can pair with Shuriken Cannon. Would give you a really effective anti-infantry platform that can chip damage on vehicles, or you can pair the Bolas with Haywire, and then you can have a pretty nasty anti-vehicle platform. They could be a dual threat because you can swap the Bolas for the Zephyr Glaive, and the Glaive gives you 4 attacks at Strength 5, Neg 1, 2 damage, which is really solid melee. And this would give you access to Haywire that doesn't hit on 4s. And that's really nice, because that's another thing that really kind of hamstrings our army, is a lot of our infantry shooting is ballistic skill 4 for the Haywires and the Dark Lances and things like that. And we don't have a ton of vehicle shooting in that regard. A lot of our army is predicated on open-topped or firing deck transports. So here's a lot of ballistic skill 4, which has historically always been 3s, but it's 4 and it's heavy. Well, that's great, but in this army, we can't not move. I don't know what it is that GW expected to happen, but when it was, this stuff's now ballistic skill 4, you +1 to hit if you don't move. Well, if I don't move, I'm probably dying. So we're just hitting on 4s most of the time. As far as running them with Drukhari, I feel like this is you could take it or you could leave it unit. Talos are more expensive, but they are more resilient, and they have access to the pain tokens, which will give them rerolls. Scourges provide a very similar shooting platform as well, and have access to the rerolls. And hitting on 4s re-rolling is just as efficient-ish. I don't know the exact math on it, but you're going to have very similar averages to just hitting on 3s. Obviously, that's averages. Hitting on 4s is usually pretty swingy. You're either hitting a lot or not hitting a lot. There's not a lot of in-between. And then -1 to hits are going to affect your Talos and your Scourges a bit more than they would the Skyweavers, because the Skyweavers are BS3 going to 4s. So again, I feel like you could take them or leave them. We do have units that fill similar roles, but if they fit your playstyle, they're worth bringing. And they give you Strength 5, Neg 1, 2 damage melee, which is something that we don't really have access to. Our 2 damage melee comes in the form of, we've got Hellions, which are Strength 4, and we've got Incubi, which are Strength 4, and then Drazar, who is Strength 6 or Strength 5, I believe, is how it breaks down. And then we have, the Archon or the Homunculus, right? The characters, and even those are Strength 3. Strength 2 anti-infantry type of interaction. So just having a Strength 5 2 damage swing in melee could be what you need, like the excuse you need to bring them. Star Weavers, these are the transports. They're going to look very similar to a Venom. There's a few minor differences. They don't have Deep Strike. Let's just jump into that. They don't have Stealth. They don't have Deep Strike, but they do get a 4-up Invuln. They don't get to break units in half, but you also have to keep in mind that the troop don't need that ability because they can come in 5-man units or 6-man units, and it just makes the Venom feel like it had that ability to justify the decision to make Witches and Kabalites come in units of 10. The rules team said, oh, let's make them come in units of 10, and then we can give the Venom an ability to break them into 5s. Not that... I'm sure you get what I'm saying. It just seems like a tacked on or shoehorned ability. The transport does get 2 Shuriken cannons, and they are definitely better than 2 Splinter cannons. And it's not that Splinter cannons are bad. They're just very one-dimensional. If your opponent doesn't have infantry, guess what? They're effectively useless because you're just always wounding on 6s. Whereas with the Shuriken cannons being Strength 6, you got to hit T12 before you're wounding on 6s. So you can at least go, I'm wounding most things on 5s. So again, Shuriken Cannon's just better. And I'm not sure why, but all the Harlequin vehicles hit on 3s in melee. And I think a lot of the Craft Worlds ones do too, like the War Walkers and stuff. I could be wrong on that. And I'm not mad. I just don't understand why Venoms and Raiders got their melee nerfed, and then these things get to hit on 3s. They do have the same hop back in ability that the Venom has. So if you really, if your positioning is really good, you can do some cheeky things. There have been times where I've charged with the Star Weaver to shut off that Overwatch, charged with the troop, been able to wipe, and then been able to just get back in that boat to keep my opponent from being able to just shoot them off the table or countercharge them off the table. They still got to chew through the boat. If you're bringing the troop and the troop master, they're definitely worth it. They do protect them for a turn or two if your opponent has indirect, and like I said, they'd let you do some cheeky things with maneuvering and positioning. The Void Weaver, it's a Venom or a Viper, but it's not a transport. It's more like the Viper than the Venom. But if you don't know, these are all effectively the same chassis in terms of the physical model. It's more along the lines of our Ravagers. It's a heavy gunboat. It does get a 4-up invuln because it's a Harlequin unit. The shooting forces battle shocks instead of reroll 1s, which is what the Ravager would get. Like I said, and it's also on the Venom chassis, so it's T6 instead of T9. The Prismatic Cannon's very good. You get 2 shots. It's a Dark Lance profile. It's strength 12, neg 3, 4 flat damage, which means you're going to have a more consistent damage output, but a lower ceiling, but you get twice as many shots as you would with a Dark Lance. So with 2 shots, you could potentially do 8 total damage, but it's not an all or nothing interaction. Because with the Dark Lances, if you fail to hit or you fail to wound, that's it. If they make their save, that's it, because it's a single shot weapon. Obviously, with the Ravagers, it's a little bit different because they have 3 of them, but ultimately, you're going to get a very similar damage output because of the 4 flat compared to just a single shot. You can replace the Prismatic Cannon with a Haywire. Once again, definitely worth it. If you are in an area where a lot of people are just vehicle spamming and you don't need to necessarily worry about monsters so much, 3 shots instead of 2, and it's strength 4 instead of strength 3. And this is another example of Craft Worlds having what Drukhari has, but it's just better. They have ballistic skill 3 shooting with their heavy weapons. They have strength 4 Haywire, that's 3 shots. It's just one of these interactions where when I'm looking at Craft Worlds and we have literally the same name and the same weapon, but it's just better over here than it is over there, it can be a little disheartening. Overall, with the Void Weaver, I'm mixed on using it in Drukhari. I don't necessarily feel like it's a necessity. It's 125 points. You are getting a very good shooting platform, but we do have some shooting platforms that are pretty good. Scourges, especially if you're taking Dark Lances, so you can just outrange things and never have to worry about Overwatch, and Scourges are cheaper. Once again, you've got the Ballistic Skill 4 versus Ballistic Skill 3 difference, but having the rerolls and not having the rerolls helps shore that difference up. So it's one of those where it's a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, in my opinion, with the Void Weaver. You could take it or leave it. If I were going to bring Harlequins in, my 500 points would probably look like this. I'd probably be bringing 2 Troop Masters, 2 Troops, and 2 Star Weavers. I might ditch transports to bring more troops. Overall, I feel like the troops and the Troop Masters just shore up a lot of the melee weaknesses that we have, and none of the Harlequins options are bad. A strong case could be made for literally any of these units, especially once you start looking at what role you need them to fill and what playstyle you have. While making this video, I did think about including Void Scarred and talking about them, but I think I'm gonna do a separate video with them. But I wanted to talk about something that I happened to notice while I was making it. The Void Scarred can take paired Hekatari blades for one of their models. Paired Hekatari blades are 4 attacks, they hit on 2s, they're strength 3, neg 2, 1 damage. Witch's Hekatari blades are 3 attacks, hitting on 3, strength 3, neg 1, 1 damage. And I saw that and I thought, well, honestly, it's no wonder our index just isn't good. It really just looks like give them whatever Eldar have, but make it worse. And I understand that this is a specific model in a unit. It's not the whole unit that has access to it. But the fact that the paired blades both give it an additional attack and twin linked, and they're neg 2, so it's just a power sword. It was just one of those where it was, man, what a kick in the teeth. Imagine if witches had that profile instead of what they have now. Now, don't get me wrong, they still wouldn't be world beaters, but holy cow, would they be so much better than they are. So it was just one of those, I had to laugh, wanted to share it with everybody. Hope you thought it was as amusing as I did. Let's shout out our hatchlings, the real Donnie G. Thank you. You are the real G. Phoenix, Jamie, appreciate the support. And then our immortals, Lord Wellingstone, Danny Boy, and Captain Too Tall. You guys are awesome. And then thanks for watching. Links on the screen, links in the description. Make sure you're checking out the web store and everything else that we're doing. We are growing. It is getting better. We are doing more and more. And a lot of it is because of all of you, the viewers, and the community that we have all built together. Thank you.